Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime, the site super moderator for Avatar The Last Airbender Online.com. I'm here today with my next Avatar comic review. This is going to be my early non-spoiler review for Avatar The Last Airbender North and South Part 2. First thing to say is a major thanks to Dark Horse Comics for supplying me with a review copy so I could get this early review out for you guys prior to release. The official release date for the book is January 25th, 2017 in comic book stores and February 7th, 2017 from like Amazon, regular bookstores, and that's also when digital copies will be out on Comixology and Dark Horse Digital and so on. So yeah, we're like under 2 weeks out from like the initial release of this book, and we don't really know a lot because there's still no preview pages as far as I'm aware, and even though I have a review copy, one of the only limitations they basically gave me was that I wasn't allowed to post any images from the book, so we still remain only having the cover basically for the book. So you know, it's fine, so I'll do my best to try and give you an idea about what the book kind of covers without spoiling too much. But of course, I'm not just going to do a really vague review where I don't touch on anything that happens in the book. So this is one of those ones where, like, if you have super strict like views on what you consider spoilers, this maybe isn't the review for you. But I am going to do my best to avoid talking about like the big moments, the specifics of like all the scenes and stuff like that, and kind of give you an idea about generally what the book is about. So, that stuff out of the way, I'll just say, a link to my written review, non-spoiler written review is in the description. That will probably cover my thoughts in more detail than I'm covering here. This is just meant to be a kind of like addition, a kind of add-on to that review, so read that if you want, and then maybe come back and watch this one. Or if you're not really interested in reading a long one, then this one's probably fine. So yeah, overall, North and South Part 2, I really like this. It is a very good book. I have some criticisms with it that I will get into, but I don't think they detract so much from the book that it makes the book kind of bad or anything like that. I think they do end up just being like some things that just stop this from being like one of the best books we've ever had in the kind of the series of Avatar comics up to now. What I like is that, you know, the writing from Gene Yang continues to be on point. The art from Team Gurahuru is like exceptional as ever, and like as always, like I think they're improving, but like can they still improve? Because I feel like I say that like every review, but it is just some of the best art like I see out there in comics and stuff like that. So I think their art is kind of consistently deserving of praise. And then as far as like the plot goes, like the really basic plot, referencing what we know from the like description and stuff like that, is that Gilak says he's going to do something soon. He basically says, "You'll see the truth soon, chieftain." We know that from the back of the book and the description. And basically the core of what happens here is Gilak, you know, showing the truth is effectively him attacking, giving a speech, and how characters react to that speech and what he says. Because Gilak still has the briefcase that he took from Malik from Part 1 that was stolen for him. So he has the plans to what exactly Melina and Malik are trying to do, and he basically leaks the details of those plans, and we get to see like Melina and Malik's reaction, which kind of revealed kind of their like true views on the topic of the North versus South issue, and like how they actually feel about the North. And because of that, you get like pretty good explorations of their characters. Gilak, of course, because he is like the key antagonist of the book, gets good character development. And if there's one positive to really get from this book, is that I really feel like that those new characters, the North and South new characters, are very well developed here. You understand Gilak's anger and to some degree why he is so extreme, but you can't side with him because of that extremeness. And I like that about him as a character, even though his group fundamentally isn't like massively threatening, because like Katara and Sokka both kind of bested him and most of his army, and then with the arrival of Aang and Toph in this comic, like Team Avatar versus Gilak's forces isn't much of a challenge, at least as far as we're aware. So like that doesn't really feel like the big thing, but it's less about kind of his force of arms and more about the political message that he's trying to get across. That if he can convince all the other Southerners who are kind of undecided on the issue or don't know a lot, if he can convince them to join him, it's like Team Avatar and a couple of others who are okay with what's happening, what the North are doing to the South, versus like everyone else from the Southern Water Tribe. And at that point, you kind of question like what is the correct side of things. And so I think fundamentally that is the core of this book. It's like what the North is doing. Are they just truly helping to rebuild the South, or are they doing it so they can then have something to like use to have a one up on the South? In that they say, we helped to rebuild you, so we deserve a fraction of basically what you kind of get from like your natural resources going forward. That you don't quite get a full vote on the world, like on the world stage. We will influence your vote as well. Like it's that sort of thing. Like we'll rebuild you, but it will cost you. And is that a good way to go about it, or what? Because as Gilak brings up, the North didn't really participate in the war. The South basically gave everything, and like almost destroyed the entire tribe. They were attacked. The North didn't try to help, but some of the Southerners did go up to the North to try and help. Without Team Avatar arriving there, the North potentially would have been taken over. We saw that in ATLA, what happened there. The one bit of the war that the North were involved in, it was just defending when an attack actually did come. And it kind of speaks to just this idea of like, yeah, like we probably should at some point learn why the North properly didn't participate in the war. They had good natural defenses with the ice fields in front of the Northern Water Tribe, but why didn't they attempt to help, really? Especially after Aang and Ko's involvement. And so it's like that sort of stuff, that like you are getting the convinced that like, yeah, like the North call the South savages, but the North has their freedom to do what they want now because the South kind of helped to participate in the war. Why do they get to have the advantage now just because they weren't almost wiped out by the war? And it's all about your interpretation of everyone's opinions, and like, do you see what's happening here as the North taking advantage of the South, or is this the North actually trying to help the South to become like a independent kind of thing of their own, where they have a like space in the World Council kind of type thing? As we're getting more towards the idea of like Republic City and like everyone having a person on the council, like what exactly are we getting at here? And like the reveal obviously tells you things about Malik, tells you things about Melina, and kind of alters like characters like Katara's opinions on Melina, which is a pretty important plot point of the book, given the ending of part 1, which with regards to that, how they resolve the reaction of Katara and Sokka to Melina and Hakoda's relationship, I think it's pretty well done. Like, it's not the super crazy, like, dramatic scenes that you expect. It's more of just, like, you get an idea of, like, how Katara feels about it, and that she's kind of worried, like, is this like, a replacement mother in a way, you know? Like, she's thinking these things, and they explore it quite well as they kind of do kind of get into the kind of feelings and emotion of it as you deal with, you know, basically all of the characters involved in this and like their opinions on it. So I think it's given a decent amount of time and explored quite well. It is some of the best written stuff in the book, and leads in terms of like a setup to the arrival of Aang into the story, which I suppose I'll talk about that now, the arrival of Aang and also Katara into the story, and also Toph into the story. Both characters are in this book. They arrive at separate times, not together. Toph arrives first, and we know that she's there as a representative for her father's company, the Earth and Fire Refinery, which is related to the fact that this book, in part, is about getting dealing with the natural resources that the South has, and the Earth and Fire Refinery wants to use them, of course. And Toph, we obviously know from the Rift, is all about progress. She's perfectly okay with machinery and stuff like that, advancement. We know that from the Rift. The problem is that she's not exactly a focus of this book. Like, just before talks can really get into place about like what exactly the Earth and Fire Refinery's involvement's going to be, the action takes place. The Gilak scene, the big Gilak scene that really is the plot point of this book, happens, and that stops like Toph from actually kind of giving the refinery's view on what's going on with the South. Similarly with Aang, you get the reunion scene between Katara and Aang, and it's really well done. but before Katara can like properly explain her full thoughts about to Aang about what's going on here and get that, you know, I suppose big emotional conversation between those two as they kind of give their thoughts on what's going on here. Before that can happen, the action scene happens again, and we're forced into action over talking, and so, you know, I assume some of those scenes are going to be delayed into part 3, and it's just little aspects of that, like where there's a slight kind of like issue I think with the book in that like it's leaving like so many of the expected scenes that we are kind of maybe wanting for part 3, to the point where part 3 almost at this stage feels like is going to have to play some of the role that part 2 kind of should have covered, but also be the resolution book as we expect. It just feels like part 2 kind of stopped short of covering everything that we needed to in this middle section of the story, to the point where Aang and Toph like only have a couple of like notable scenes, and then after that they're just kind of there as kind of strong characters to have involved in the fights. They're fun, they're in character, of course. There's some really, like, especially with Toph, there's some really hilarious moments with her. It's just that her involvement as the representative isn't really a big plot point, and then Aang doesn't really get a chance to kind of give his thoughts on things, give his, like, view as the Avatar on what's going on here just yet. That it almost feels like maybe there was a bit too much action here, and it took away from maybe some of the dialogue scenes that we maybe should have had. But as I said, it is only a minor point, because I still think the core of this book is more focused on Katara, on Melina, Malik, and Gilak, and basically the opinions of those characters on what's going on. I do still think that Toph and Aang giving their opinions on what's going on will play an important role, but you know, it didn't happen right now, and it makes their roles just feel a little bit less than what they maybe needed to be. Sokka similarly is a character who, like, he is somewhat of a focus here because everyone's obviously happy to have Sokka and Katara back in the tribe, but he hasn't really been given an importance within this story just yet. They're trying to do this thing where he's like a consultant with Melina, but again, like, because of the action and stuff like that, it's stopped before he can properly give his opinions on everything. We know that Sokka likes machinery and advancement as well, and he's all for that, and in a way, this book presents Sokka and Katara as being on opposing sides of the issue, but it doesn't really try to draw a line in the sand between them and like create the conflict that the plot of this book is brother and sisters on opposite sides and that they really disagree with each other. It's just more that like, oh, they kind of happen to disagree with each other and they're not really arguing with each other, they're just kind of there, and the action has really stopped any of the conflict from happening. That maybe if there wasn't the actual action fight stuff, that we would have got these kind of more emotional kind of argument between characters as they give their opinions on things, which I feel part 3 kind of has to have a decent amount of. But other than that, like, there's a couple of minor plot points, like the Paku stuff and the characters he's training kind of comes back for a couple of panels. It's a pretty vague plot point, like it's only given like a panel in part 1, and it's only given like a couple of panels here. I'm not exactly sure what they're going for with it. I maybe expected a different reaction from Katara finding out about it, but I assume that it'll be given some time in part 3. It just feels like one of the least utilized side plots we've ever had in an Avatar comic at this stage. Yeah, I think that's basically the gist of what I want to cover here. Like, as I said, my written review in the description has a lot more detail on like everything basically. I just wanted to cover my main thoughts on the kind of core of the plot. So to sum it up, I really like the book. The characters feel in character. The new characters are well developed. Katara is well used. There's some really nice emotional scenes. There's some kind of dramatic scenes as we go on. The only weaknesses would be that the introduction of Aang and Toph doesn't feel perhaps as strong as it perhaps should have been. Sokka continues to not really be like massively well used, and some of the side plots aren't stunning, but it is a book that I think people will like. The amount of times throughout me reading this, that even reading it like the second and third time, where I got to a certain panel and I was just laughing because it was such a funny scene, or I was grinning because I was so excited to read the kind of dialogue between certain characters, like the Katara and Aang reunion scene was, as I said, really well done. and just how they explore some of the things is very well done. I have a feeling it might end up being one of those books where only like 5 or 6 of the scenes will really be talked about, and then the rest might not get as much focus within the fandom. But that's just my opinions, having like have no one to basically bounce my opinions off on the book. That's just my kind of initial reactions, having read it a couple of times. When we do the podcast review, which we'll try to get out on the day of release, that will be when I think I get my kind of full exact opinions on this book out, where I'm able to talk to the other podcast co-hosts about it and get our thoughts together properly. Right now, this is how I feel about it. It's a really good book. It's not perfect. Like, even my criticisms of like how Aang and Toph are used, they're still fun characters, of course, to have there, and some of the funniest scenes are with like Toph. But it just I think if you're really being critical, there are some problems that keep this book from being like one of the best ones we've had so far. So once again, thanks to Dark Horse for allowing me to do this early review by sending me a review copy. But that's basically all I wanted to say here. So yeah, look out for my full spoiler review where I give my full thoughts. I'll do a video review and a written review. You'll see those both on January 25th, as well as hopefully the Avatar Online podcast review of the book, where we go super in depth. But that has been the video for today. Thanks for watching, and bye.